How does one feel alone in a world shared with almost 7 billion people? Every person has a story whether they know it or not. Every human is a result of a reproductive cycle, a being created with the genes of two others. When I look in the mirror, my face is a puzzle of mystery. I have eyes, a mouth, and a nose, brown hair, I have a beauty spot and straight teeth. I have everything considered normal. But when you don't know whose eyes they are, whose mouth that is, whose nose, hair, and every genetic detail, suddenly you are no longer you. You are a face of randomly thrown together features. To not know always plays on my mind. To not know who I am or where I came from. To be alone. There are two things I need to clarify. The first is that I'm not adopted. I grew up in a household with two biological parents, a brother and a sister. However, the second is that my mother is, and my grandfather, and my uncle. Thus, whilst not directly affected, my history is still unknown and my future is completely unpredictable. See, adoption is the reason my questions cannot be answered. It acts as a wall between my curious mind and the truth holding answers that many take for granted. It's not as simple as wanting to know whose genes you have inherited, but furthermore your health, your life expectancy, anything medically related. I don't know what ride I'm in for. I have nothing to go off, and in more ways than one, I am alone. And of course you then have the days where your curiosity gets the better of you, and you search and search, and you wonder and you search, and you wonder some more. Where and who shares your blood? Do they ever think of me? Do they know I exist? Do they regret giving my mother up? If I did track them down, would they want to see me? Are they even alive?
Well, you could say that I was the product of a very good Christmas party back in the 1960s. From what I know, my mother, my biological mother, was a young woman from Ireland, although I don't know where specifically. When she was pregnant with me, which, as I say, was as a result of a party, the father is unknown, her strict Catholic mother decided, as most Catholic mothers did in the 1960s, where their daughters were in a particular situation, that they would go to London and have the baby so that none of the neighbours or family knew, and then go back to Ireland. And so I guess that's what happened. She put me up for adoption, and that was in London in 1963. My adoptive parents took me in when I was about 9 weeks old. I already had an older brother who they had adopted, and funnily enough my father was also adopted. of course way back in the war years. When I was growing up, I always knew that I was adopted. My parents never hid it from me. They didn't discuss it, but they didn't actually hide it. It was never a surprise to me. And I remember all through my primary years with my friends, we would surmise all kinds of wonderful biological backgrounds. Maybe I was related to the royal family, or maybe my mother was a famous actress, and it gave us hours of entertainment. And it was fun at the time, but at the end of the day, I always felt I was different to my friends. They had their mother's nose or their mother's eyes. They could distinguish, you know, their features with someone they could relate to, and yet I couldn't. And for me, I guess that felt a void. And I guess that void has been with me all my life. Growing up, as I say, I was a difficult teen. I found it difficult to fit in. I also found it very difficult to maintain friends. I felt that they would always run off and find somebody more interesting or prettier or better than me. I got a call one day and a counsellor wanted to talk to me because they had some information regarding my mother. I was so excited. I thought that this is it. They found her. I'm going to be able to answer all these burning questions that I've held throughout my teenage years. When I got there, I was counselled. They wanted to know why. I wanted to find out what my motives were, and I felt kind of affronted by that because I felt it was my right to know. So I went in and I had the interview, and with all my expectations, what they came up with actually was my original birth certificate. And I looked at this piece of paper, and it was interesting because when I was a very young child growing up, I used to say to my parents, so, if you hadn't have called me Ruth, what would you have called me? And they said, we'd have called you Gail. And I was thinking, oh, I wanted to be a Susan, I wanted to be a Michelle, I wanted to be something exotic. I didn't want to be Gail. And it was kind of disappointing to me. So I had this certificate, and all of a sudden there it was. I was Gail Heffernan, Irish Catholic, date of birth, father unknown. My mother had been a clerk typist, and that was it. And that's all they could find. And in some ways it was so exciting because I suddenly had a piece of the puzzle that was answered, but in other ways it was like I'd come to the end of the line, and that was very disappointing. So I went on with my life, and I grew up, and I had my own 3 children, and it wasn't until my daughters particularly were a bit older that I suddenly had this need to search for my mother, actually physically search for her, because I wanted to know about my medical history. You know, these days so much is written about breast cancer and everything else that I wanted to know, is it a genetic factor that I might pass down? And having had a scare myself recently, it suddenly became extremely important. I actually went online and employed a private investigator as such who looks at adoptive children and tries to match them with the mother, and I signed up for all kinds of websites that tried to match mothers and you know, and adopted children, and it came up with nothing. And so I kind of took from that it wasn't meant to be, that I wasn't meant to meet her, that she actually didn't want to meet me, and that's hard. I think that makes me feel as though either I'm not important to her, or she's forgotten. And it's interesting, I think as you get older, at the end of the day, you realise and appreciate, without any doubt, the people who really love you.